Sometimes life has a way of humbling us when we least expect it. And tonight, I want to share with you a story about a woman who thought she had everything figured out until one evening changed her life forever. Let me take you to Manhattan. Picture the most expensive restaurant you can imagine. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, so crisp they could cut paper, and the kind of silence that only money can buy. This place was called Le Bernardin, and it was where the powerful came to see and be seen. At the best table in the house sat Catherine Morrison, 38 years old, worth millions, maybe billions. She wore power like other people wear perfume. Her designer blazer probably cost more than most people make in a month. Catherine had built a real estate empire from nothing, and she didn't get there by being soft. In the boardrooms of New York, people whispered her name with a mixture of respect and fear. But tonight, Catherine wasn't closing a business deal. She was sitting with her 7-year-old son, Ethan. And Ethan was having what they call a sensory meltdown. Have you ever seen a child in true distress? Not a tantrum, but real overwhelming panic. Ethan was screaming, banging his head on that expensive table. His little hands were shaking, and his eyes looked so lost, so trapped inside his own mind. You see, Ethan had autism, and sometimes the world just became too much for him. Too loud, too bright, too everything. The other diners were staring. Some pretended not to notice, hiding behind their menus. Others watched openly, uncomfortable, judging. Catherine felt their eyes on her like hot needles. This was her worst nightmare, being out of control, being exposed, being human. And then something unexpected happened. A waiter appeared. His name was Daniel Rodriguez, a black man in his mid-30s wearing the simple uniform of the restaurant staff. Without asking permission, without saying a word, he knelt down beside Ethan. And here's the beautiful part. He pulled out a napkin and started drawing. Numbers, symbols, sequences. Within moments, the screaming stopped. The silence in that restaurant was deafening. Ethan's breathing slowed, his eyes focused on the napkin. And for the first time in what felt like hours, he was calm, peaceful, present. Now you'd think Catherine would be grateful, right? You'd think she'd thank this man who just gave her son relief when nothing else could. But that's not what happened. Get that man away from my son now! Catherine's voice cut through that restaurant like a knife through butter. Every head turned, every conversation stopped. She stood up, trembling with something that looked like rage, but might have been something else entirely. Fear, maybe, or shame. Who gave him permission to touch my son? She demanded. Her voice was cold, sharp, dangerous. Do you have any idea who I am? The maitre d' rushed over, sweating. Ma'am, he's just helping the boy. Daniel specializes in alternative communication. I don't care what diploma he forged, Catherine interrupted. The words hung in the air, ugly and raw. At the next table, her friend Dr. Rebecca Chen looked away, embarrassed. But Daniel? Daniel just stood up slowly. There was something in his eyes, not anger, not hurt. It was dignity, pure, unshakable dignity. I apologize for the intrusion, Mrs. Morrison, he said, his voice steady and calm. Your son was using echolalia, repeating number sequences to self-regulate. I simply wrote them down to create a visual anchor for him. Catherine froze. How did this waiter know her full name? And how did he know medical terms that even she barely understood after 2 years of expensive specialists? But then came the moment that changed everything. Mommy, look. The voice was small, soft, but clear as a bell. Everyone in that restaurant held their breath because they understood what was happening. Ethan hadn't spoken a real sentence in almost 2 years. Not to his mother, not to his doctors, not to anyone. Ethan pointed at the napkin. 7, 6, 5, 4. It's a countdown. It calms me down. I want you to imagine Catherine in that moment. This woman who controlled boardrooms, who negotiated million-dollar deals without blinking, who never showed weakness. She felt the floor disappear beneath her feet. Her son was talking. Her baby boy was forming words, making sentences, communicating. And a waiter, a man she had just publicly humiliated, had made it happen in minutes. Before she could process this miracle, the restaurant manager appeared. Mr. Rodriguez, please follow me to the office immediately. His tone made it clear. Daniel was in trouble. To Catherine, he added with a oily smile, Mrs. Morrison, please accept our sincerest apologies. The employee will be dealt with accordingly. But Daniel wasn't broken. Catherine, who knew how to read people like most people read books, saw something shift in his expression. This man was calculating, planning. He wasn't defeated at all. Don't bother, Daniel said, unbuttoning his vest slowly, deliberately. I quit. Some places don't deserve the best of us. He turned to Ethan and smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. It was a pleasure meeting you, young mathematician. And then Ethan did something that made every eye in that restaurant well up with tears. He reached out and grabbed Daniel's hand. Stay, he said, his voice trembling. Please. Catherine felt tears burning her eyes. 2 years. 2 years of the best therapist money could buy. International consultations, experimental treatments, tens of thousands of dollars. And nothing had worked like this. As Daniel walked toward the exit, his head high, his dignity intact, he did something subtle. He slipped a business card onto the napkin with the numbers. Catherine picked it up, hiding it in her palm like it was a secret. Dr. Daniel Rodriguez, PhD in behavioral neuroscience, specialist in nonverbal communication. A doctor, not a waiter, a doctor with a doctorate from the best schools in America. For the next 2 weeks, that card sat on Catherine's nightstand, haunting her. Ethan had gone silent again, just drawing those same number sequences over and over. The boy who had spoken one beautiful sentence was locked back inside himself. Call him, her friend Rebecca kept saying. Put your pride aside. It's not pride, Catherine whispered one afternoon, watching Ethan through the mansion window. It's fear. But there was something else too, something she couldn't quite name, a feeling that Daniel Rodriguez being at that restaurant wasn't an accident. So Catherine did what powerful people do. She hired investigators. And what she found made her blood run cold. Daniel Rodriguez was a genius, Harvard graduate at 22, Stanford doctorate at 26, published in the most prestigious neuroscience journals, a rising star in his field, destined for greatness. And then, 3 years ago, he vanished from academia. The reason? A scandal. His younger brother Miguel had died during experimental treatment at a clinic. Not just any clinic, the Skyline Clinic, the same clinic where Ethan received his monthly treatments, the same clinic that was owned by Morrison Enterprises, Catherine's company. In that moment, Catherine understood. Daniel wasn't at La Bernardin by accident. He had been watching her, studying her, maybe even planning something. The word revenge flashed in her mind like a warning sign. But Ethan needed him. Her son needed this man who could unlock his voice. 3 days later, Catherine found herself in a small cafe in Brooklyn. No security guards, no driver, no armor of wealth and power. Just her, sitting at a wobbly table, waiting. Daniel arrived exactly on time. Jeans and a blue shirt. Before he sat down, he took out a photograph. A young boy with a brilliant smile, looked at it, and whispered something. A prayer, maybe, or a promise. Thank you for coming, Catherine began when he sat across from her. I didn't come for you, Daniel replied, his voice cold as winter. I came for Ethan. The silence between them was heavy with everything they weren't saying. Finally, Catherine spoke. You knew who I was from the beginning. From the moment Skyline accepted Ethan as a patient, his half-smile said it all. Nothing about their meeting was coincidence. What do you want? Catherine braced herself for demands. Money, a lawsuit, public humiliation. But Daniel's answer shocked her completely. I want you to hire me as Ethan's personal therapist, with full access to all his medical records at Skyline, and permission to completely change his treatment. That's absurd. Why would I trust my son to— Because, Daniel interrupted, leaning forward with intensity burning in his eyes. At the restaurant, when everyone saw a meltdown, I saw a boy desperately trying to tell you that he's being harmed by the treatments you think are helping him. Tears welled in Catherine's eyes before she could stop them. How did you— The numbers weren't random, Mrs. Morrison. That sequence was a countdown, yes, but it was also a code. Ethan is a genius, and he's fighting to survive what they're doing to him at Skyline. In that moment, sitting in a cheap cafe in Brooklyn, Catherine Morrison made a decision that would change everything. Not because she trusted Daniel Rodriguez, not because she understood what was happening, but because she loved her son more than her empire, more than her pride, more than anything in this world. "My driver will bring your contract tomorrow," she said, standing on shaking legs. "But know this, Dr. Rodriguez, if I find out this is revenge for your brother's death, there's no place on earth where you can hide from me." Daniel didn't flinch. He just watched her with those calm, knowing eyes. What Catherine didn't see as she walked away was the slight tremor in Daniel's hands as he put away his brother's photograph. She didn't see the small recording device he discreetly turned off under the table. The game between them was just beginning. And Ethan, sweet, brilliant Ethan, was the king on the chessboard. The one piece neither of them could afford to lose. 3 months passed like a dream Catherine didn't want to wake up from. Every morning, Daniel would arrive at the mansion, and every day, Ethan got a little better. It wasn't just that he was talking now, though that alone was a miracle. It was the way he laughed, the way he drew pictures with meaning and purpose, the way he looked at people with those beautiful eyes and really saw them. Ethan even created his own mathematical codes to express his feelings. When he was happy, he'd draw spirals. When he was worried, geometric patterns. It was like watching a flower bloom after years of winter. Catherine would stand by the window, watching Daniel work with her son, and something inside her was changing too. The ice around her heart was melting piece by piece. Maybe she had been wrong about so many things. Maybe money and power weren't the answers she thought they were. But you know what they say about calm before the storm, right? One afternoon, Catherine's phone rang. It was Rebecca, her friend, the neurologist. And Rebecca's voice was shaking. "It's about Dr. Rodriguez and Skyline. I've discovered something disturbing." An hour later, Rebecca sat in Catherine's office, placing a flash drive on the desk like it was a bomb. And in a way, it was. "What do you know about Miguel Rodriguez?" Rebecca asked. Catherine frowned. "Daniel's brother? Only that he died during experimental treatment at Skyline." Rebecca's face went pale. "Not quite. According to these internal reports," she paused like the words hurt to say, "Miguel was deliberately used as a test subject for something called the Chrysalis Protocol, without proper consent, without his family truly understanding what they were signing." The room started spinning. "Where did you get this?" "Daniel came to me 2 months ago. I didn't want to believe him, but the documents..." Rebecca's voice cracked. "Catherine, did you know about this?" "Of course not. I would never approve." But even as Catherine said the words, a memory flashed through her mind. Late nights in her office, stacks of papers to sign during the company's expansion, documents she'd barely read, trusting her executives to handle the details. "It's all documented," Rebecca continued. "And Catherine, the same protocol is being used on Ethan." Those words hit like a physical blow. Catherine couldn't breathe. Her son, her baby, the treatments she'd been paying for, believing in, trusting. Before she could process this nightmare, her phone rang again. The housekeeper's voice was panicked. "Mrs. Morrison, Dar Rodriguez is in the main office with Ethan. He's locked the door, and he's broadcasting something on all the screens in the house." Catherine's heart stopped. The drive home was a blur. When her car screeched to a halt outside the mansion, there were already crowds gathering. Journalists, camera crews, and families. Dozens of families holding photographs of children. Inside the mansion, every television, every computer monitor, every screen showed the same image. Daniel sitting calmly beside Ethan, in front of a wall covered with documents, photographs, evidence. "Good afternoon, Catherine," Daniel said, looking directly into the camera like he could see her. "I imagine you're already on your way. Don't worry, Ethan is perfectly safe. In fact, for the first time since beginning the treatment at Skyline, he is truly safe." Ethan smiled and waved at the camera. "Hi, Mom. I'm helping Dr. Daniel save other children." Catherine's legs almost gave out. What was happening? "What you see behind us," Daniel continued, his voice steady and strong, "is the truth about Project Chrysalis, an experimental protocol designed to reprogram neurodivergent brains. They promise parents a cure for autism. But what they were really doing was causing permanent brain damage. The camera zoomed in on a photograph, a young boy with Daniel's eyes laughing in the sunshine. This is Miguel, my little brother, diagnosed with severe autism at age 4. Our mother was desperate to help him. When Skyline offered this experimental treatment, they made it sound like a miracle. They promised he'd get better. They didn't tell us about the risks. They didn't tell us that other children in the program were having seizures, neurological damage. They didn't tell us until it was too late. Miguel died at age 12. Catherine felt tears streaming down her face as she ran through her own mansion, security unable to open the locked office door. On the screens, the broadcast continued. Security footage from Skyline appeared. Children convulsing, doctors rushing with sedatives, meetings where executives discussed acceptable losses and calculated risks. "What you didn't know, Catherine," Daniel said, and his voice softened just slightly, "is that while I worked with Ethan these past 3 months, I wasn't just teaching him to communicate. I was also healing him, reversing the damage. The improvements you saw weren't just therapy, they were recovery after I secretly stopped the chrysalis protocol." Finally, Catherine burst into her office. Daniel and Ethan sat there peacefully, the broadcast still streaming to every screen. Catherine started, but Ethan moved quickly, positioning himself protectively in front of Daniel. "No, Mom," her son said with a firmness that shocked her. "Dr. Daniel saved me. He saved my brain." Daniel stood, and despite everything, his dignity remained unshaken. "You have two options, Catherine. First, you can deny everything. Sue me. Use your power and your money to silence the truth. If you choose that path, this evidence has already been sent to the New York Times, the Washington Post, and federal prosecutors." He paused, letting that sink in. "Second option, acknowledge your mistakes. Take responsibility, and use your fortune and your influence to fix this. Fund treatments for every child who is harmed. Transform Skyline from a place of profit into a place of real healing. Become the person you always wanted to be before you got lost chasing money and power." Rebecca entered the room, standing beside Daniel. Catherine felt betrayed, abandoned. Her friend had known and hadn't told her. But then Ethan walked over and took his mother's hand. His small fingers wrapped around hers, and he looked up at her with those his beautiful eyes. "Dear Daniel says you didn't know everything," Ethan said softly. "He says bad people hid things from you. He says you're not a bad person, Mom, just a lost one." Catherine's legs gave out. She collapsed into a chair, watching her entire empire crumble on every screen around her, images of Miguel smiling, documents with her signature approving protocols she barely remembered, footage of children suffering. "It's too late," she whispered. "I've destroyed everything." Daniel turned off the cameras with a quiet click. The sudden silence was deafening. "It's never too late to do the right thing, Catherine. Believe me, I spent 3 years planning to destroy you completely. I wanted revenge for Miguel. I wanted you to feel the pain my family felt. But then I met Ethan and I realized something. Revenge wouldn't bring my brother back. But the truth could save dozens of children still in the program." He extended his hand, not as an enemy, not as someone seeking revenge, but as a potential partner in something bigger than both of them. "Help me save them," Daniel said simply. In that moment, Catherine Morrison had a choice. And for the first time in years, she chose with her heart instead of her head. 3 years later, everything had changed. The Chrysalis Reborn Foundation stood where Morrison Tower once dominated the skyline. But this building was different. There were gardens and playgrounds, windows that let in natural light, and laughter, so much laughter, from children who were finally being heard. Catherine stood by one of those windows, watching Ethan, now 10 years old, patiently explaining mathematical concepts to two other boys in the courtyard below. He was so patient with them, so kind. "He really has a way with words now," Daniel said, appearing beside her with 2 cups of coffee. Catherine smiled. Daniel wasn't wearing a waiter's uniform anymore. He wore a white coat as the foundation's scientific director, using his brilliant mind for its true purpose. Who would have thought we'd end up here? Catherine accepted the coffee, their fingers briefly touching. She barely recognized herself anymore. The woman who once commanded empires with cold calculation was gone. In her place stood someone softer, still strong, still determined, but now guided by love instead of ambition. "Remember the day of the Senate hearing?" Daniel asked quietly. How could she forget? Catherine Morrison standing before Congress, cameras broadcasting to the entire nation. No lawyers to hide behind, no PR team to craft careful statements, just the truth. "I failed," she had said, her voice clear and steady. "Not just as a CEO, but as a mother, as a human being. I signed documents without reading them. I trusted people without questioning them. I built an empire but lost my soul. Today, I'm here to do what's right, no matter the cost." Morrison Enterprises was dismantled. Her fortune, practically all of it, went into the foundation. Over 600 children affected by the Chrysalis Protocol received free treatment, real treatment, healing treatment. The mansion was sold. The cars, the jewelry, the private jets, all of it, gone. Catherine moved into a modest apartment near the foundation. She worked there every day, not as a CEO, but as a volunteer. She held parents while they cried. She played with children who were learning to trust again. She did the work. "Miguel would be proud," Catherine said softly, looking at the photograph in the lobby. Daniel's brother had a place of honor there, with a plaque that read, "So that no child will ever be silenced again." "He would be, Daniel." "Would be," Daniel agreed, and for the first time since they'd met, his voice held no bitterness. Only peace. Rebecca appeared in the doorway. "They're here." The main auditorium was filled with families. Parents who had once demanded justice now witnessed something greater: redemption. Catherine took the stage without notes. Her hands shook slightly, but her voice was strong. "When we lose our way," she began, "the universe sometimes sends us messengers. For me, it was a waiter who refused to be invisible, and a child who deserved to be heard." She looked at Ethan in the front row. "Today we announced that the reversal protocol developed by Dr. Rodriguez and our team has been approved internationally. It will be available free of charge. No family will ever pay a penny." The room erupted in applause. Daniel stood into the back, tears streaming down his face. "People ask me if I regret losing my fortune," Catherine continued. "The truth is, I've never been richer. I've learned that there is no greater wealth than the truth. There is no greater power than doing what's right, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Later, when the auditorium emptied, only 3 people remained. Ethan approached his mother and Daniel, holding a drawing. Not a code anymore. Just a simple picture of 3 people holding hands. "Family," Ethan said. Catherine looked at Daniel, the question in her eyes. Could they really be this, after everything? Daniel nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Yes," Catherine said to her son, taking his hand while extending her other to Daniel. "Family." As the sun set that evening, painting the sky in golds and pinks, 3 people who began as adversaries discovered the greatest truth of all. Sometimes our deepest wounds become doorways to our greatest healing. And as night fell gently over the Chrysalis Reborn Foundation, a lesson whispered through the halls, a lesson for all of us. True wealth was never in the empires we build or the money we accumulate. True wealth is in the lives we transform when we find the courage to do what's right, when we choose love over pride, when we choose truth over comfort, when we choose redemption over revenge. Catherine Morrison lost everything that day. Daniel Rodriguez exposed the truth. Her company, her fortune, her reputation. But she gained something infinitely more valuable. She gained her soul back. She gained her son's voice. She gained a family built not on blood or obligation, but on forgiveness and purpose. And in the end, isn't that what we're all searching for? A chance to be better than we were yesterday? A chance to make things right? A chance to transform our mistakes into meaning? That's the real story here, friends. Not about a rich woman who fell, but about a human being who learned to rise. Thank you for journeying with me through this story of prejudice, pain, and ultimately, redemption.